This is the GenWhy Leaders Podcast. Welcome to the GenWhy Leaders Podcast, where we guide millennials to become the next generation of business leaders and entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Hughey, and multiple times a month, we bring you interviews from high-performing millennials who are challenging perceptions and changing expectations of our generation. Our mission is to help you overcome fear, take action, and go confidently in the direction of your dreams. It's time to start preparing now, mainly because 10,000 baby boomers are retiring every day, which will create a vacuum of career opportunities that you've been waiting for. Will you be ready?
Welcome to the Student Podcast. Our goal is to act as a conduit for young people to help them simplify complicated topics, concepts, and success stories into actionable pieces of intelligence they can use in their everyday lives. Today, we have a fellow podcaster, Eric, as our guest. Eric, welcome.
Cody, thanks so much for having me, bud. This is going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited.
Yeah, minus the technical difficulties, slightly at the beginning. I'm pumped up as well.
It happens.
Appreciate it. much more experienced podcaster than I, so that makes you feel better. But also a little bit about kind of the way we always start is kind of the hero's journey. Most people know it's kind of it's the common narrative in most superhero movies, stories, fairy tales, all that kind of stuff. So tell us just kind of the brief overview of your journey so far.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks again for the opportunity. So I guess a little bit about me. I'm a Kansas City native. I grew up here in Lee Summit, which is a suburb of KC on the Missouri side. Went to the University of Central Missouri, got my degree in broadcast media and public relations, stuck around and got my MBA in marketing just to try to become, a well-rounded comms and business professional. So from then on, I'm about 10 years into my career now. And I like to say I've spent my time on all sides of the media desk. So kind of collectively speaking, that's really about 3 years in kind of corporate PR, marketing, 3 years in the agency seat, kind of being the liaison between corporations and the media, and then about 3 years at a B2B publisher, actually selling advertising space, all forms, print, digital, events, you name it, we probably sold it. And then most recently, the kind of, I guess it was right about the start of this year, I launched my first business, which is Vessel Media. Our mission is really to guide publishers, that's, media companies, newspapers, magazines, podcasters, anyone who really operates from a baseline of advertising revenue, and help them grow the revenue, cut costs, save time. And you alluded to it, but also have a podcast that's kind of been operating in the background during all that experience for the last 2 years or so. It's called GenWhy Leaders. And our mission is to really guide millennials to become the next generation of business leaders and entrepreneurs. So we're about 70 episodes in with that and having a lot of fun there as well.
Oh, yes. Yeah, no, that's a fun one. That was one of the first, I think, podcasts I was ever on that kind of got me interested. Like, that seems kind of cool. I would like to kind of dabble in some of that stuff. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
Multiple different lanes here too, and I think it'll lead to a great conversation as far as call to adventures, because I feel like you and are experienced with what they're like, kind of the scary portions of them, the cool portions of it, that kind of stuff. So I would love to kind of ask you a little bit about some of your most favorite call to adventures, maybe some of the scariest, just kind of the highlights of, I know there's many in a lifetime, but I would love to talk about some of the most significant ones in your path so far.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think like most people, I'm probably coming out of, the biggest call to adventure and kind of tipping points of my life. And that's, going through COVID and a worldwide pandemic. And I think I'm living proof that there's no good time to do anything in life, that you can always use the time excuse if you really want to lean on that. But during COVID, me and my wife welcomed our first child. I quit my job and started my consulting business all in about the last 6 to 9 months. So it's been a whirlwind, but it's definitely a call to adventure, to say the least.
Oh yeah. And what was some of that stuff like? Was this I love specifically getting into the mind, brain, body portion and starting to talk through like some of like what was happening upstairs, how'd you get through some of that stuff? Because I would say that you are completely correct, as not everyone would frame all of the things you just said as a call to adventure in the middle of a giant worldwide pandemic. So how did you frame some of those things? How did you, is just a positive mental attitude, or what were some of the specific ways that you kind of reframed some of those things, thought about them, moved through that as with that framing?
Yeah. Kind of thankful for some of my PR and media training. Cause I thought back to, crisis, and there's this idea of media training and developing key message whenever your company or you as an individual goes through a little bit of a crisis or a dark time as a company, and you kind of need to bounce back and win some brownie points in the school of public opinion. And kind of one key phrase that we always go back to is that, you should always see every crisis as an opportunity. And that's really kind of what I landed on as I went through the pandemic. And, I've always had this entrepreneurial spirit, leaned on the time excuse way too long in my life for the first few years of my career. We can get to that in a couple minutes, but just, kind of going through that and, just overcoming that time excuse and knowing that I had this, somewhat of a cushion, I guess you'd say, right? Because I mean, there was the stimulus checks, there was kind of this feeling in the ether almost that everyone kind of understood that it was probably the biggest challenge that we'll all go through, in our lifetimes as a generation. And so I think everybody was very forgiving of that. Everyone was very graceful. It's like, okay, you have, a child to get to daycare, you have a doctor's appointment, you're sick with COVID, a family member sick with COVID. So it was like, if you were ever looking for a cushion to do something big and take a risk, it was like you had the financial cushion and you had like the time cushion, right? Everybody said they wanted more time, but did you take advantage of it? And so that's really kind of what I had to like beat myself over the head with and overcome. And I was just thankful to do it.
Oh yeah, I like that. And so then there's been a couple things and this can span your entire story, but mentors are a humongous piece that I love. Like their past is your future. And I just love that saying. I heard it once. I was like, that's amazing. So how have you used mentors? I've heard tons of different ways people do this. Some people have pictures of people on their wall that are like mental models for them to follow, that maybe they don't meet with every month, but they can model and like their behavior, like huge Michael Jordan type figures. Sometimes it's a business mentor, sometimes it's a family mentor. So how have you utilized mentors and how have they helped you in your path?
Yeah, I guess I'd go for more of like a practical approach. I think, one of the biggest mentors that comes to me is my father. He's been an entrepreneur, a solopreneur. He's a CPA and tax accountant. If anyone needs, tax work done, hit him up. Rick G. Hughey Company Associates, Lee Summit. But yeah, just, again, he raised my family. Right? I have two brothers and my mom. So he raised a family of 5, pretty much my whole life. And just seeing the way he operated and more so the autonomy that he got. And so he coached, me and my brothers are all about 3 years apart. So he coached all of our baseball teams in some fashion, was always present, always got to come to the baseball games, the football games growing up. And, just watching that and seeing some of my friends' dads and parents that weren't able to come to sport events and take the time off and have that autonomy of schedule was really eye-opening for me at a young age, because that's really what I wanted. Now that I'm starting my own family, it's like, man, it would be great to just be able to call the shots and organize my schedule as needed to go do what I want. And then I think mentors can, kind of have a misnomer that they have to be older than you. And so I've really just tried to adopt the mindset that mentors can be any age. And, my podcast has really helped me connect with plenty of people my age and younger than me that are way smarter and have done way a lot more cooler stuff than me. And so just learning from people in hour bite-sized chunks like these podcast interviews has been really beneficial.
Yeah, I like that. The other question I'd love to ask, are there actual pieces of intelligence where I'd love to focus on? Are there frameworks or are there ways that you go about using mentors specifically? Are there ways that you go to seek them out specifically? Was the podcast one of those ways to go try and get more of those types of mentors or things like that? Are there actual bits or maybe tips, tricks that you have within that world, how they can be used, one thing I did heard that I would love specifically would be how to use younger mentors. I feel like that's that is a whole freaking thing in and of itself. I would love to understand what you mean by that a little bit, but any other tips and tricks I'd love to hear too.
Yeah, for sure. I think, everyone's crunched for time, right? And it's just the era we live in, and everyone's busy. So I think providing value is kind of a buzzword, but I think if you can find ways to provide value to others, that's kind of the key. And not having any expectation in return to, have them reciprocate with anything. I think that's kind of the best mental model that you can go in with. And so with me at the podcast, it was kind of my first entrepreneurial endeavor because I wanted to scratch that itch. But as I've dove into it more, it's really just became a great tool to gather mentors, gather people in my network. And I think, leading with the idea that you're going to provide someone value, let them speak, let them promote their personal brand, let them promote their business for, 30 minutes to an hour on my show is a lot easier to ask than, asking someone if they could, tell me everything, about XYZ industry or building a company. If you just kind of have that conversation organically over a podcast, it's just way more natural.
It kind of benefits both people too, if you think about it. Thinking about like the advertising piece of it as well. I like that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to ask, especially if anyone out there listening is in a sales type or business development type of role. It's way easier to, LinkedIn message someone and say, hey, I got this podcast, would love to have you on the show. That's a way better conversation starter than, hey, will you buy this from me?
Right. A little bit more arms length. Take me to dinner first. Put me on a podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Type of vibe. I like that. I love that. That's a beautiful little tip right in and of itself.
Yep.
So when you started to, you've hinted at this a couple of times, the entrepreneurial itch, and you've kind of had that seems to me to be a little bit like the crossing of the threshold. Like, what was that when you stepped into that itch, or you stepped into that calling a little bit further, harder, like dove off the cliff, essentially, hope there's a parachute type moment? What was that like, or what has that been like? How did you get to the place, or when was there a moment when you realized, I'm ready, I have these powers? Like, when was your cross the threshold moment or moments?
Yeah, I think really kind of at the turn of the year. We'd been through almost a full year of COVID, and there, it was kind of like on the horizon that vaccines were coming out, but it was just like kind of unsure of like when the world would get back to normal back in January. And so, I kind of started building my business even back in the fall, like kind of brainstorming and mapping out what it would look like, what clients I would go to and things like that. But it really just came down to the fact that I know at any job I've ever had, I'm going to outwork other people, but they're going to get paid the same amount as me. And that never really sat well with me. And then kind of also tying back into the previous comment about, just having autonomy. So knowing that we had a baby on the way, and knowing that whatever role I would go to, I would never have my outputs or my inputs match my outputs, meaning like I feel like I would never get paid my worth, or what I feel like I get worth, or what value I bring to a business by being an employee. So I really wanted to maximize my potential. It was going to have to be going out on my own. And so really just, praying and meditating about all those things really allowed me to land on that and overcome the fear and, jump out on my own.
And so were there any mentors? Were there any conversations? Were there things that led up to that moment of like the crossing the threshold moment necessarily, or specifically, or was there like a final straw moment, or was there anything like that? Or was it just kind of the general accumulation?
I would say general accumulation. I mean, there's like any job, it had its pain points. And so my previous job, there was scenarios. I mean, great people, I love them to death. But it just, the writing was on the wall for me to take my next career move. That's all I'll say, I guess.
I love that. Nice and PC. Your marketing PR, my friend. I love it. So on the other side now, expectations. Like, is it everything you thought it would be? What are some of the road bumps that the entrepreneurial threshold here? What are some of the maybe road bumps, things you did not expect? And then what are some of the things that you were like, hell yeah, this is as amazing as I thought it would be. I am so happy I did this, never looking back.
Yeah, for sure. I'll start with a positive, and I think it has really tenfold blown my expectations out of the water as far as the autonomy piece. And so that's been great. I played golf last Friday with a buddy that I hadn't seen in a couple of months, and I didn't have to answer anyone. I didn't have to clock out, didn't have to take vacation time. I just went and played golf. So things like that are like really cool. And I think there's this kind of the counterpart to that I'm overcoming, and probably the negative to your question is really just retraining my brain. And so, when you're an employee, you feel this constant pressure to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week, whatever you have to do to appease your boss, appease your clients. And so I think when you step out of that and can bill your own hours or bill retainers or whatever at the rate that you feel you're worth and fit that inside a smaller amount of hours, you can, really increase your income and decrease your time put in. And so, starting off, I really felt this anxiety almost that I had like always be putting in 8-10 hour days. I'm like, okay, what are you doing next? What are you doing next? And really, yeah, I should be doing that maybe in a sense to keep building my business aggressively, but at the same time, I didn't have to. And so that was kind of one barrier that I had to overcome. It's just like, dude, just relax and enjoy the ride. I have no employees right now. It's just me, get full autonomy. So just, enjoy it and build.
This is amazing, especially for, I just feel like entrepreneurs all over the place right now for young people. It's like, I'm in preschool and I want to be an entrepreneur. It's like, okay, dude, it's not the sunshine and rainbows you might necessarily think it is. But being able to think through that feeling, I feel like shifting from the parent, as if you're younger, observing parents that feel what you're talking about, the employee mindset, or if you're younger and shifting into and from, like you just described, your exact transition, employee to entrepreneur. What were some of the things that you did? How did you start to figure out and let yourself be okay with some of those things for that entrepreneur mindset that's so put forward, like balls to the wall, 3,000 hours a week? Like, how do you give yourself a break almost without feeling like you're letting yourself down? How do you beat that voice in your head that's telling you like, no, you're not doing enough, man. You're not doing enough. You're forgetting something. There's something more. Like, what are some of the things that you did?
Yeah, I think for me, it just kind of went back to kind of filtering my thoughts is like, okay, am I thinking as an employee or am I thinking as a business owner? And that's kind of like the main filter I'm using right now to kind of gauge all the negative thoughts that I'm having. And, that to your point, that the hourly question was like, okay, that's definitely an employee thought. Like, okay, boss, like what's next, boss? Yes, sir. Yeah. No, ma'am. All this different stuff. And again, it's just when you can call the shots and, pick your rate that you're billing, then, everything changes really quickly.
I like that. Yeah. So shifting almost, I like that because I talk a lot about when I build heroes, how people build heroes. They're stuck in they fired and wired together a pathway of employee, right? Mm-hmm. And what would an employee do is the question they're subconsciously asking. So I like the thought process of shifting that owner hat and almost firing and wiring new pathways as the owner and asking different questions to yourself. I like that.
Right. Because I mean, you're experiencing that, right? Like, I would imagine that, you're finding ways that you're probably delegating a lot more than you were as compared to when you were employee, and trying to fit a lot into a little and being creative in that.
100,000%. That's delegating is hard. That's one of the things I struggle with. You're correct, is control and letting go of some of those things. Because I'm like, I'm pretty sure I could do this faster, better. That's a mental trap that I get stuck in as well. I agree, 1,000%. Yep. So I would love to also dive into, speaking of mental traps, caves. So along the journey, lots of people, Luke literally went into a cave to face Darth Vader. Iron Man literally went into a cave. There's lots of them, Batman, the Batcave. But they almost always emerge. But that cave teaches a lot of things. So have there been caves that you've gone through, walked through, even if it was when you were younger, that you've learned some things from? I would love to kind of dive into some of your caves.
For sure. Yeah. For me, I guess kind of going back to overcoming the time factor, right? Like there's no good time to do anything. I mentioned that earlier. And so I really leaned on that excuse for a while, and I don't think it was for really bad reasons. So I think the main cave in my life has really been health, I guess, if I was to boil it down to one word. And so in the last 3 years or so, my family's had between, I guess, what is it? Probably 6 immediate family members. We've had, I think, 8 hospitalizations within 3 years and quite a few surgeries all within that. And so it was, for me, it was always kind of one of those things, like I was always focused on my health, a family member's health, all this different stuff, and like worried about them, trying to take care of people, serve them and things like that. And so I feel like health is wealth, and it's, the greatest wealth you can have. If you don't have your health, you can't make money, you can't take care of your family. And so, yeah, the more, I experienced that and kind of had that recollection or epiphany, maybe, the more actually encouraging it was to take this leap. Because, I think in previous roles, I was always focused on recognition from my boss and, promotions and the money aspect. But, once you go through all that and like see all these family members sick, you really do realize that health is the greatest wealth that you can have. And that, again, really just encouraged me. As like, okay, well, what's the big deal if I quit my job and like go start a company? And, if I fall on my face, which I don't think I will, then I'll just go get another job. Like, who cares? So yeah, it was kind of the dark cave that fueled the mission at the same time.
So how long did it take you to get to the place where you're like, all right, who cares? Bet. Like I was at a place when I was transitioning from Sandler into CBAi as well.
Yeah.
It was not one conversation, I will say, with my coach. Shout out. But what was that process like? To me, that, I guess in my own story, felt a little bit like a cave. Was that like you were on the edge of something, but you weren't quite ready? What was that process up to the point of, all right, yeah, worst case scenario, come on, I can do this?
Yeah. I think it was definitely fear, and just fear of failure, fear of other people's opinions. I boiled down to fear, really. And I've always kind of been indecisive too. So you can't be indecisive as a business owner, entrepreneur. It's kind of been a big lesson that I've learned. I've tried to just learn by doing and do this methodology of act, assess, adjust. So I think overcoming the fear and not being indecisive, like, oh, well, I could start a business doing this, I could start a business doing that. Like, okay, well, start with your domain experience and what you know, and go do that. And then if it fails, go to the next thing. So that was really the brick wall that I hit finally, or busted through rather, was that indecisiveness and fear.
What was the final straw? What finally pushed you to that first action? What that got you? I talk about this all the time, like an airplane. Jumping out of an airplane is not a normal human behavior, right? And you're not going to think out of an airplane. You don't feel out of an airplane. You jump. So what was the feeling, thought, fear, things like? What got you? What was the kick in the ass to get out the door to jump?
Yeah. So this kind of goes back to the health aspect. So most recently, our daughter was born on November 20th of 2020. And so she actually had some seizures when she was born and had to be kept in the NICU for like 2 weeks. I think it was like 12 days. And so me in work, I only had, 2 weeks off. So I'd literally spent all of, besides like 1.5 days in the NICU every single day, driving to and from the hospital on my parental leave. And so that was really the kick in the ass for me, is just seeing that. And again, kind of going back to what I witnessed growing up, and my father being able to have full autonomy of schedule and do what he wanted, to then fast forward to what the situation me and my wife were in with our baby, and being like, wow, this is, and I probably shouldn't be focused on this, but again, this is kind of like the kick in the ass. It was just seeing that, like, wow, I would really love to stay home now that my baby's finally home, but I'm gonna get 3 days with her at home, then I'm gonna go back to work. Luckily, one of the silver linings of COVID for me personally was that I did get to work from home. And so she was, I was kind of around in the other room, but it was still like unfocused or broken attention. So kind of combining all those things was really like, okay, Eric, if you have an ill family member, again, it'd be really great if you could just have the autonomy of schedule and the freedom of choice to call the shots and book your schedule however you need.
Wow. I like that. That's a very clear kick.
Yeah.
That's a great one.
Rock solid.
In the past, from what you saw from your dad, current, present behaviors and things that were happening, the future you saw, like all in one moment, like, all right, dude, let's get this thing moving. I like that.
Exactly.
And I'm happy you made it through there.
Thanks, man.
You kind of I didn't know if I wanted to talk about it in a cave or talk about it as a superpower, because what you had said was act, assess, adjust. I think that, I don't want to put a superpower in your mouth, but that sounds like a very great superpower. But I do want to shift into superpower. So I would love for you to kind of go into some of the things that you think got you where you're going, got you to where you are currently, and then are going to help you get to where you're going as well. And talk about them like that actionable intelligence, like that really quick bite, like the act, assess, adjust. I thought that was awesome. I would love you to talk a little bit about that at least, but anything else I would love to hear as well.
For sure. Yeah, I'll start with the act, assess, adjust before I forget. And it's easy acronym, right? 3 A's in a row. And that was another thing I leaned heavily on because my weakness was indecisiveness. So if I just adopt the 3 A's, that is very cyclical model of like, okay, we'll just keep going, keep doing. And this cyclical effect will make your decisions for you almost, that you don't have to like get into the paralysis by analysis or whatever you want to call it. And so that's actually from a book, Unscripted, by MJ DeMarco. He also wrote The Millionaire's Fast Lane, but 2 really great books about entrepreneurship, especially, but really kind of just great mindset. And so I definitely recommend those to you and your viewers if they want to check them out. I'm sorry, I already forgot. What was the second part of that?
Any other superpowers that you think that you've used to get where you are currently, and then things that you believe you'll start to use, or you're studying now, or you're working, training, growing, developing right now to get where you're going?
Sure. Yeah, I think if you talk to my friends and family, they would all consider me a leader. And I think that has kind of subconsciously played a factor in my mind all throughout my life, to not to sound like the old guy at the end of the bar with a couple ones in his pocket or something. But, back in high school, I was the captain of the football team. I was a student body president. I was homecoming king, all that good stuff. So I think for whatever reason, I just maybe have a personality that I'm personable or that I connect easily with people. And then, really just not afraid. This kind of is counterintuitive, right? Because I mentioned I had had a lot of fear to start my business, but I think other people would say that I'm not fearful and that I can venture out into the unknown and try things and not be afraid to be judged. And so, I think leadership in general would be a superpower of mine, just taking on responsibility and not knowing every answer, but going out anyways. I would also say, kind of combined with that, networking or, connecting people, and then really, I guess you'd call it storytelling or maybe strategic communication. If I combine all my studies and all my career experience, I think that's really where a lot of my strength lies as far as presenting myself, telling a story, branding, strategic communication, all that sort of stuff. And I guess as far as, building those in the future, I think, this first business, definitely all those factors play in, all those superpowers play into it. I think the one I will continue to build and try to improve is the indecisive component, and using that act, assess, adjust model.
Heck yeah, I like that. And so a lot of the things, I guess currently now, do you have a tool because it sounded like the indecisiveness, you said that was a weakness, so I developed something to use for that. Do you actively have a strategy or something that you use to examine weaknesses and then try and figure out some small tweak or something like that you could do? Or was that just an instance where you're like, oh yeah, this works pretty well?
Yeah. I wouldn't say I probably actively look at my weaknesses as much as I should. I do have a journal. I used to be Darren Hardy's Living Your Best Year Ever journal. Now I'm in, you know that one?
I love Darren Hardy. Hell yeah. Better every day.
Yeah, exactly. So I think he retooled his journal in the last year or two. So I couldn't find that's what I used in many years past. But in the last year or two, I've transitioned to a guy here in Kansas City, you may know him as Ryan Bennett. He used to be a VP at IdleSmart. He's probably a little bit older than us, but great guy. And so I'm using his journal right now. It's very similar to the Darren Hardy journal, and it's been great as far as, okay, like, what did you get done this week that you said you were going to get done? What habits did you implement that you said you were going to implement, and kind of just tracking that in more of a consistent manner and kind of keeping myself in check rather than like, taking a class or going through any type of program to work on a weakness with like a mentor, to some type of training. It's more of like a day in and day out thing that I'm looking at.
I like that. Someone who's hopefully maybe read The Compound Effect from our friend.
Yeah. Yep. It's on the shelf right here somewhere. You probably see the title almost.
Oh, I think I see it there. The consistent behaviors, though, are built through repetitious like habits and routines and things like that. Do you have, I don't always ask this question, but I'll ask to you, do you have a habit that you think, because I would define a habit as a superpower, but a habit of habits that you think has like the secret sauce to some of your success? Some people say meditation. Some people say I read 10 pages a day. Is there something like that you think has really helped you a ton as far as like a habit?
I think spending time on LinkedIn actually is probably my habit that's paying the most dividends. And so I'd say I'd spend 10x my time on LinkedIn compared to any social platform, compared to email even, just because I think it's very in line with the network culture that we're in. I learned this from someone speaking at a conference recently, but we used to be in the hierarchy culture, right? So like before really even the internet, but back in the day, Mad Men era, you have to call through gatekeepers and admin at companies and then go to mid-level manager and then finally get to decision makers. And by then you've had dozens of phone calls and repitched yourself tons of times. But now with LinkedIn, boom, you go straight to the person you're trying to target, CEOs, decision makers at companies. And even with a 300 character image without using, LinkedIn Sales Navigator or anything like that, you can pitch yourself pretty well and, say compelling message pretty concisely to get to the people you want to get to. And so that's been the kind of my habit that I'm doing every day. It's one of my habits in my journal is like spend at least an hour on LinkedIn every day and network with people.
I like that. So in the nature of active intelligence, what are some of like the key things you're doing when you're within LinkedIn? Like probably not just doom scrolling. What are there little like tips, tricks, hacks like within the platform that you have found most effective?
Yeah. So I try to search by people. So since I'm building the business, I'm just really sourcing for leads right now. So I search by people. I search by, there's a little like related or suggested companies kind of taskbar, nav bar to the right side of a lot of pages. And so searching the people, related companies, and then just searching hashtags for everything that's relevant to my business and my industry has really been the most beneficial. And it's pretty crazy how quickly you can go down the rabbit hole. And I think more importantly, leveraging the people already in your network. So if you know someone in a similar industry or the same industry, similar experience, looking at their past companies, hey, can you introduce me to this person that you used to work with? I think I could do XYZ for them. And just, go about the network that way, I think is underutilized right now.
I like it. That's awesome. Yeah. That's a cool one too. A very, very, very specific one, especially for people who are just kind of coming out. We got a younger audience, so that's awesome. Okay. Yeah. So I would love to then dive into all of these skills, superpowers, caves, things like that thus far. What is it that you're becoming? Like, what is it that your current mission is? What's your higher plane, or what you're becoming, the future, that mission you're working on currently?
Yeah. Getting to the higher plane would just be, getting to both the time autonomy, maybe I guess I'd call it, and then the financial aspect, because I mentioned it earlier, but I felt like no matter how hard I worked in a job, I could never get to the financial level that I wanted to get at. And I had the fear of many different things, but then also I felt like I couldn't start anything that would make money for whatever reason. It was like a really odd belief, like, hey, you're not capable of making money. And I think I had this audacious belief that I was going to be like Joe Rogan status when I started my podcast as my first entrepreneurial endeavor, and that I was going to make buku bucks. And so I was like kind of got in this like spiral of like, oh, Eric, you're not an entrepreneur, dude. Like, come on, like get real. You can't make any money. What's that about? And so just getting to the point of kind of combining all of my past experience, packaging it up into this company that I have now, providing a ton of value to my clients, having that autonomy to be with my family and our new baby girl, while also maximizing my inputs in terms of dollar amount to get to the income levels I want to get to. That's really kind of that new plateau or threshold that I'm trying to get to. And I think it'll just continue to hopefully level up.
Yeah, no, I like that. The financial freedom and then also the time freedom or time autonomy. I think that's a good little like a circular wheel. That's a fun one. I'm trying to get there too. I think that's one of the other misconceptions of. I think you're right. Like just listening to you, like, oh, I'm going to be the Joe Rogan of podcast or whatever. You're like, oh yeah. Especially what you see on like social media news is all these entrepreneurs standing by these Lambos and stuff. It's like, bro, they are walking up along the beach and see a Lambo and take a picture next to it. Come on. Like, why there's this expectation that you will be the Joe Rogan and that kind of stuff. And then you realize, bro, I've got credit cards, I'm going to make this, got to pay payroll. I was like, what's happening? So I think that's one that I'm chewing on right now as well too. That now that you've mentioned it, I like, you called it out of my mind too.
Yep. But I think the good thing you can rest in as a content creator, podcaster is that, I think from the outside looking in, everyone thinks that you start a podcast just for the money. But what I've learned through my journey is that it's been, one, such a great networking tool, but two, specifically for your business, it's such, and I think I mentioned this earlier, such a great lead generator, right? So the ask is so much better when you reach out and provide value through, a collaboration like this versus like, hey, buy XYZ from me.
Right. Yeah, no, I could not agree more. Well, awesome. I always love to leave guests with kind of like the final saying. Sometimes I like Tim Ferriss. I don't know if you listen to his podcast at all, but he asked the question like, if you had a billboard, and it sometimes falls and doesn't, but I've always liked that one. But we won't do the billboard one. But just the final thoughts or any final tips, tricks, advice, anything you want to leave these 18 to 30-ish year olds with as we kind of wrap up here.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate the opportunity. I was searching like mad to try to find it before you wrapped up what you were saying there. I can't remember who said this, but the quote is, and it's very in line with my indecisiveness, but it's many a misstep have been made by men with idle feet. So it's like many missteps have been made by men with idle feet. So it's like the only wrong action is no action. So whatever you're thinking about doing, get out, go do it, learn by doing, act, assess, adjust. If you fail, move on to the next thing. If you grow, keep building.
I freaking love that. I talk about action creates motivation all the time. Action's the number one thing that you've got to be able to do to change feelings and thoughts. So I think that's the best way you could possibly end this. Like,
mic drop. I'll slide that over. Epic mic drop.
The mic slap. I like that. Well, I appreciate you jumping on, and I appreciate everybody jumping on to listen to this edition of The Student. Thank you so much, Eric.
Cody, thanks so much. I really appreciate the time. It was a lot of fun. That wraps up today's episode. We hope to have brought you some valuable key takeaways. Most importantly, whatever you learned, take action on it. Apply it to your life. Apply it to your career. Motivation and inspiration only come as a result of taking that first step. So if you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe on whichever platform you found the show. You can also follow us on all the major social media platforms or contact us directly at GenWhyLeaders@gmail.com. That's GenWhy leaders@gmail.com. Until next time, I'm Eric Hughey, and thanks for listening to the GenWhy Leaders Podcast.